Minneapolis Television Network in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And today is the 22nd day of the 8th biblical month. And that's November 1st on the cursed Gregorian calendar, the one that curses us. The 22nd day of the 8th biblical month is good to know. We're going to read a little bit here about steps to secure a land patent. Now, land patents are, God gives us the land. The Bible says all things are yours, and that's what we say in the body of Christ today. There's a great revival coming forth on the earth today before the end of the world too. And so the body within itself says all things are yours. To those that are coming in, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all these things should be added unto you. We own everything. The kingdom people own everything. Not the bankers, not the frauders, the defrauders. Steps to secure land patent. We present the following in hope that you will educate yourself with the truth and prepare yourself to stand as our forefathers did and as the founding fathers of this nation did, with your land, liberty, and rights intact. By definition, a land patent is the only form of proof of absolute title to land in the United States of America. It's what the government gave in the beginning. But the government cannot give you land. Land was already owned by we the people. A patent is the highest evidence of title. It's not the title itself. And it's conclusive against the government and all claiming under junior patents or titles, U.S. versus Stone. The patented grant of land is a public law standing on the statute books of the state and is a notice to every subsequent purchaser under the conflicting sale made afterwards. State statutes that give less authority ownership of title than the patent cannot even be brought into federal court. Langdon versus Sherwood. Land patents are granted to the named party and to their heirs and assigns forever. Therefore, to secure ownership of land, you must have a proper chain of title secured to your acceptance of a property's assigned underlying land patent, or you lose your land in a land contest. The following steps are the steps we follow to secure the proper documents to accomplish this. We use our copyrighted forms, which cannot be published here because there are so many unscrupulous people that would use these forms incorrectly. Under the Jubilee of the Bible, when God gives you the land, you have the land. When someone else in the body owns the land, then it goes back to them. But all things are yours, and we with all lowliness, fear one another in love, we share in the sufferings, we share in the consolations. There's a lot of crookedness in land ownership, but there's a lot of righteousness in history of it. These forms are only available from Team Law directly, with the exception of our filling out said copyright forms. The following steps are the steps followed by the person seeking to perfect their title with their acceptance of the land patent related to it. My land property was given down to me through a family. And of course, I purchased land, which I own up north, and it's into the maritime system under residential, but it should be commercial. That's a military residential. It's not private. It should say this is military commercial land when it says residential. It's not really private land. But this is the original private land registration from the government telling you that it is private land. But that is not the bottom line. The bottom line is possession is 9/10 of the law, folks. Possessing the land. The Bible says go in and possess the land. When they went into the promised land, go in and take over the land. God told them to take the land. There's I got some new papers here, but I was going to go back to the Jural Society of California, which are so good. It declares things as they are, you know. No documents have had greater influence on the citizens of our country than the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The Declaration of Independence marked the birth of our republic and set forth the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Later, the Constitution outlined our style of government and defined the rights that are protected from intrusion by government. That are protected from intrusion by government. That are rights that are protected from intrusion by government. These documents have been a beacon to all people who value freedom. They are just as meaningful now as when they were written, as the American statesman Henry Clay says, the Constitution, it says of him, but the Constitution for the United States was not made merely for the generation that then existed, but for posterity, unlimited, undefined, endless, perpetual posterity. Well, the Bible says all things are yours, so we own it for eternity. Oh, this is the Declaration of Independence. I read that on one program before. When in the course of human events, a lot of you know that. Younger people may not. Is the land of the free still free? Not when our Constitution was changed from Constitution for to the Constitution of the United States. So now we have a problem. We have a deep state government that's taken over every area of our life, but we still have our Christian inheritance still held by God. And of course, President Trump needs to turn the corporation, which is the military complex and the maritime law, military tribunal courts across the land. He needs to get rid of the emergency as soon as possible and turn the republic back on. Give it over to the republic. The president for the republic is James Buchanan Geiger. Now, Trump won by the voting, but the votes were for a maritime president, not for a common law. He's the deep state president, but he's trying to get rid of deep state, he says. Let's hope he's not like Queen Mary, who went up with the Protestants and became queen, and then she killed all the Protestants after that. You know, when a person runs their course to the end, that's when you know they're the true person that did righteousness for the people and for the posterity of all the people. So I'm praying for President Trump that he'll do that, and I hope you pray too that he will do that. The United States is a corporation, 1871. Since the Act of 1871, which established the District of Columbia, we have been living under the United States Corporation. Do you hear that? We're living under the United States Corporation, not the Constitution for the United States. We're living under the United States Corporation, which is owned by certain international bankers and aristocracy, rich people of Europe and Britain. The Act of 1871 formed a corporation called the United States. April 23rd, 2014, when this was printed. The Democrats against Agenda 21 from the Arizona Tea Party. Is history repeating itself? The city of Bloomington, Minnesota, taking federal funds for growing smart. Redevelopment plans about us. We are registered Democrats lifelong who have become aware of the United Nations Agenda 21 negative impacts on our local, regional, and national government. We are civil rights advocates, pro-choice, pro-gay marriage, who until recently considered ourselves progressive Democrats. We are university educated, middle-income professionals who seek to make common cause with others in the United States who share our concerns. We are engaged in educating ourselves, our peers, and our country about UN Agenda 21. Sustainable development, smart growth, form-based zoning, green energy mandates, carbon offsets, cap and trade, redevelopment, and other programs that restrict our land rights and civil rights. This virtually important information transcends party lines and illuminates much of what we have witnessed over the past 2 decades. This is not a left or right issue. This is an American issue. This site will help you to identify what is happening to your town and to stop it. It's called the Democrats Against UN Agenda 21. This summer of 2011, the Post-Sustainability Institute, in collaboration with the Santa Rosa Neighborhood Coalition and Democrats Against UN Agenda 21.com, is hosting the Behind the Green Mask Conference in Santa Rosa, California, bringing together activists and leaders from Northern California and beyond. The conference will include such topics as redevelopment reform, smart meters, UN Agenda 21, erosion of property rights, and how to fight. For more information, please contact us. This is a nonpartisan event. Our website here, Post Sustainability Institute. See our website here, Post Sustainability Institute. Reduce world population by 80%. That's the Agenda 21. We're talking about. Democrats don't like it. ABC, all human cattle to be microchipped by 2017. A lot of your Mexican leaders took the microchip already. Some companies in Wisconsin volunteered to do that. Obama healthcare reform bill requires microchips in Americans. I think Trump redid that law, from what I've heard. The Act of 1871, the United States is a corporation. The Admiralty Court exists because of the U.S. is under martial law. Military courts, like I said, every court in Hennepin County is a military court. It's unlawful in a time when there is no war. They created the emergency, a fake emergency. To remind entities that the Admiralty Court is the court in which the gold braid goes around the American flag, which is martial law, or under Admiralty law. From the martial law, since Abraham Lincoln's executive order putting it under martial and staying under martial law, the country has to have some kind of war every 2 years. Thus, the war on drugs, the war on whatever. His Admiralty laws are used in the courts in such a way that they are not necessarily tied to the Constitution, although the law of the land. In other words, they overthrew the Constitution by doing this. That's why a lot of people go to court and wonder, where's all your rights? What happened to all your rights? Since the Act of 1871, which established the District of Columbia, we have been living under the United States Corporation, which is owned by certain international bankers, aristocracy of Europe and Britain. The Act of 1871 formed a corporation called the United States. In this video clip below, Catherine Albright, author of the book on spy chips, explains how microchips work and how RFID tracking is used in all kinds of products, and then explains how embedded microchips work in the body. Watch carefully near the end of the clip when Joe Biden, a senator at the time, asks Justice John Roberts at a confirmation hearing, can a mentor tag be implanted into a human body to track his every movement? Yes, we'll rule on that, Mark. My words before your 10 years over. This statement by Biden clearly exposes the heart of the Illuminati agenda, which is to insert a microchip into every human being and control them as our ancestors of long ago controlled their slaves. This is absolute proof that the New World Order not only exists, but is entering the final stages of a totally controlled police state, where citizens lose all their rights, even the right to live. This is what George Orwell warned about in 1984, which was written 60 years ago. Big Brother is here and staring us in the face. We bind that in the name of Yeshua. We pray, loose the gospel, the kingdom of God over the land in the name of Yeshua. Amen. 25 April, Trump orders State Department to slash $5 billion from the UN budget. This is what you and I have been waiting for. Two major actions have been taken in Washington, D.C. to prepare the end of the tyranny of the United Nations. You and I must not let these opportunities die. First, President Trump has ordered the State Department to slash $5 billion from the money we give to the UN. The UN needs to do right by God in order to be the UN. You know, the Constitution for America was the history of it. Why the First Amendment? You know, Congress shall make no law, right? Established in religion, or to prohibit the free exercise thereof, was because in England and in Europe they were killing people for being Protestants and for bringing forth the Bible. It's all about the Bible, folks. It's not about other religions. It's about the freedom that's in the religion of the Bible, the liberty that the people had. Some of them were Baptists, some were Anabaptists, some of them were Sabellians, some were monotheists, Some of them were Puritans, some of them were Pilgrims. You know, they're different peoples, and they were growing in the spirit. The government was just saying, let's not stop these Christian people or make laws against them. That's what that Bill of Rights, that first Bill of Rights says, okay? It says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, pure religion and undefiled is to visit the fatherless, right? But we're talking about the religion of the Bible, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. The free world has always known that religion is talking about the Judeo-Christian Bible, but when it comes to other gods, that's other religions. Religions plural, okay? But when it says establishment of religion, singular, we're talking about the Judeo-Christian religion. So get that straight in your hearts and minds. You young people, I know it's, you know, they did disgrace to our English and changing all these things and making the syntax grammar crooked in your teachings as people grew up to change our founding fathers what they accomplished. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, meaning the Judeo-Christian religion, period, okay, singular, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Well, why would we prohibit the free exercise of Satanism? Because it's proven to curse people and do evil, right? And murder people, right? Why would we consider the free exercise, prohibiting the free exercise of atheism? Because it produces no good fruit for the kingdom of righteousness, the kingdom of honor and glory. It does not produce life. It produces death, okay? They can rob life and say that they're part of the atheism, but atheism is actually sucking off of the freedom of the religion of the Bible. So they're not prohibiting the free exercise or prohibiting the free exercise there. They're speaking of the government not prohibiting the free exercise of the religion of the Bible. Now, the government has been doing that under the military maritime courts. All you people that have been doing that, you're doing like what they did back in Europe before America was born. You're losing your eternal life. Let's stop it, okay? Because God can give you forgiveness. David murdered, he was forgiven. You can be forgiven, but turn away from these evil things. So we don't want to prohibit the free exercise of this one religion. That's what this is saying. It's not saying all religions we want to prohibit. We want to stop prohibiting them. No, they were prohibited back then, and they need to continue to be prohibited. We don't want things that, through the maxims of the law, they prove that they don't create life. We don't need those. That's what America is based on. Making the right choice to follow God and to follow the Bible, or the abridging of the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. I'm redressing the government right now. I'll get back to not prohibiting the free exercise of that religion, which is of the Bible, the Judeo-Christian religion. The other ones are not included in this Bill of Rights. Yes, we love the people, but we don't love their religion, okay? Because their religion is other gods, and it causes curses for our land. Curses will be our water, curses will be our field, curses will be our cattle, curses will be our bodies. We don't need that in our land, okay, government? That's why this is made for you, government, to obey. Everybody must obey the higher powers that are true powers. We pull down the strongholds of the fake powers and loose the righteous powers for life. In the name of Yeshua. The river of life go forth now, in the mighty name of Yeshua. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. When the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Army, the Air Force doesn't bring their weapons home, they're part of a maritime government that kicked out the civil side. But then when they bring their rifles and guns home, that means we do have a well-regulated militia. They've been trained and they're back at home and they're free. And they don't have to be enlisted in the military anymore. They're enlisted in the Minuteman Army, amen? The militia. Militia means at home. The military that we originally have the right to have. The military that we are of. not the military that we created later for a war. That's the secondary military for a war, for a time of war. But to secure the free state, we need that militia. And now we have a state that's trying to bring around all these other religions and bring on us curses and dominions of demons, and we need to cast off that death in the name of Yeshua and loose the righteousness again in the land. Revival will go forth in the mighty name of Yeshua, pulling down the strongholds, loosening up the prisoners, and letting righteous men rise up in the mighty name of Yeshua. Righteous women, righteous men rising up, righteous young people, righteous older people rising up, and life going forth, and liberty of life coming forth in the mighty name of Yeshua, as the government is corrected, going back to the republic. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner. Britain was putting people in people's houses, soldiers in people's houses, making them feed them and everything. Nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. I've got men in my house that pay nothing, do nothing. It's the time of this maritime war, and they call it a housing court. It's not lawful housing court. Housing court is brought on by maritime jurisdictions. It's fake. It doesn't cause any righteousness, does not cause life, causes bondage, enslavement, and bondage for the city, for the people. Amendment 4, the right for the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue upon probable cause. They make tickets now all over the place for people, and they don't show who's making the ticket or what for. There's no probable cause. Just do what we say. It's military actions instead of civil law. Supported by oath of affirmation. Who's making an affirmation that this needs to be done, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. 5. Article 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces, or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor to be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. We need to restore the Convention of States needs to restore private property. They cannot go and change the Constitution until they re-ratify the 10th Amendment, which brings the powers back to the people, which gives us private property again, instead of classifying as residential, which is a military commercial venue. Residential, they charge you taxes on that house, and big taxes too. So we need to go back to private property. Without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken. How can you take private property when the whole land, there's no private property anymore? It's all residential, commercial, military property. America, wake up. We've got to go back to private property for Amendment 5 to even work of the Bill of Rights. They suspended our Bill of Rights, and we need to get it back. Let's rise up and bring it back. In the mighty name of Yeshua, rise up like an army. Voices heard. Speak the word. Go forth. Take possession of the land. In all, Article 6, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by the impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. A jury of your peers would be an impartial jury, because they're not going to be favoring you if they know you. And in families, many people have their enemies in their families. But we also have our friends in our families, but they know who you are, and justice will be brought forth publicly in this trial. A right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. If there's a crime committed, it has to be done publicly in the trial. All this hiding of cameras and hiding of courts and no cameras involved, this is all unconstitutional maritime military courts, folks. When there's military, military has no civil law, it has no law. It does what it wants. And we have to stop this military emergency baloney that's going on in our land while there's peacetime supposedly happening. They create a war and emergency. They create it so that we have to have another war to be under this maritime jurisdiction, this military tribunal court system. To be informed of the nature and cause of his accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him. When someone gives you a ticket from the city to fix something in your yard, you need to have, if there's somebody that testified against you for that, you need to have them witnesses come against you. And to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Example, the city made me take up my carpets. Somebody turned to me in and the city came and gave me a ticket, made me take up my carpets. The carpets were 3M. I could vacuum, get the dirt out, and the sand would always go down low. You sometimes vacuum up some of the sand, but the black dirt, if it got on there from the shoes, I could vacuum. I had nice clean carpets for sidewalks. And if I fall down and break my hip, who's going to pay for that? If I fall down on my carpet, I don't break my hip when I'm carrying a load and I trip accidentally. So the city defrauded me by taking my carpets away. But who did it? They wouldn't show me who did it. I could no witness against me. These kinds of laws are military and are non-life-giving, non-biblical, non-constitutional laws of the deep state government, which has to be stopped. Amendment 7, in suits of common law, which is the Christian common law, the biblical common law, folks, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. But the Supreme Court overrides all of this. The Supreme Court of Heaven, the New Jerusalem, oversees all of this, folks. But we have to give it strength, and we do in the name of Yeshua. Amendment 8, excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, or cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. You know, if a person doesn't make very much money, you can't give them an excessive bail because he can't get out then, right? Tie him up completely. The enumeration of the Constitution, this is Article 9, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So the Constitution of the United States has already undermined this. They undermined Article 5. They undermined this. Even though it's written there, but it's written as a lie. When there's war, then you can lie to your enemy. It doesn't matter who, because Franklin Delano Roosevelt made a law that we are the enemy, the public. How can you make a law like that? And we voted in that president, and our vote counts as what? Counts as deep state maritime government. Where our votes do not count. They took away our voting rights by doing that. They suspended your real voting rights. Because when you're voting to cut your own head, cut your own throat off. Cut your own head off. Article 10, the powers, this is the one that needs to be re-ratified by the Convention of States. The power is not delegated to the United States. And that means the original United States, not the corporation of the United States. And it stops them too. By the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. Now, the federal government is prohibited by the states because the states have their own jurisdiction, right? The federal government cannot come into the states and take over the state's jurisdiction. That's not the federal government's portion. Their portion is beyond the high water mark. That's your portion, government. When you made war and emergency powers, you made the highways in here because you needed it for the military, and you kept a jurisdiction over that by bringing in commerce into the land. And the Statue of Liberty from the atheist country France came here worshiping commerce liberty, not the biblical liberty. We need to get that back out. We need to get the government back out of the land, out to the high water mark to protect the land from foreign invaders, foreign or domestic. But domestically, they need to work together with we the people and the states and not override us with federal mandates in the land. They need to, and using fake appointed commissioners and people that are on boards to make laws that are not constitutional. Judge was poisoned after ruling bank foreclosures is illegal. All mortgages are null and void. My case is the Brantland case in Finland, Minnesota, 50 Silver Hill Drive, Finland, 63 something Finland now is a fire number. But I won a foreclosure there because I paid too much for the land to begin with. And the bank said, you approved fraud, but it's not in the court record because they don't want people knowing that you can win a foreclosure in the state of Minnesota. And that was back in 1986, I believe. Judge poisoned after ruling bank foreclosure is illegal and all mortgages are null and void. People, why are we the people continuing to allow these thieves, murderers, and traitors to get away with their criminal actions against us? Why? The greatest crime against humanity, with the advent of the internet in the 80s and knowledge no longer being restricted to well-controlled sources, one of the things that I discovered was the facts about the way money works in this world. We've all heard the various sayings about 5% of the world's population holding 95% of the world's wealth, but not many are sure how and why this is our reality. Doing some online research about what is money and how it is created, we will inevitably lead one to discover the surprisingly fraudulent ways in which banks create money and make loans, because the world's banking systems, as they exist now, continue to cause pain and suffering in generation after generation and of mankind. I consider this insidious con job of the banking and monetary system to be the greatest crime against humanity. The greatest crime against humanity. Rather than reiterate the way money should work and the way it does work, and rather than rewrite the advantages and disadvantages of monetary reform, I urge you to view the various hub pages and online materials to educate yourself. Okay. There has been a movie called Zeitgeist. Z-E-I-T-G-E-I-S-T. Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist. Making the rounds online, and it discusses and exposes the various historical persons, events, and laws over the past years that have led us into the almost hopeless situation we now find ourselves in. God has declared that this movie is now mandatory for all humans incarnated on earth. What? Who wrote that? God did he? So if you haven't watched it, grab a bag of popcorn and do so right now. Somebody's joshing with us here. One aspect of the Zeitgeist movie I would like to devote this hub page to is referred to as the Credit River decision, or the case of Jerome Daly versus the state of Wisconsin. In this case, Jerome Daly defended himself against a lawsuit brought by a bank holding the mortgage on his house. Mr. Daly had defaulted on the mortgage, and the bank was suing to foreclose and take his house. Unfortunately for the bank, even though it was 1969 and all good little citizens were doing as they were told, never daring to question any kind of authority, Mr. Daly was well educated in the way banks create money. Mr. Daly knew that when a bank makes a loan, it instantly creates money by the stroke of a pen in a ledger. Book entries, altered values and book entries on the bank's liabilities, which then is transferred to the borrower's account. And of course, the borrower has to pay back the loan with real money, plus interest. This, of course, is the big problem. Simply stated, Mr. Daly, also being a lawyer, knew very well about the law of consideration, meaning essentially that a contract was null and void if both parties are not exchanging something of inherent value. The law of consideration, that's how mortgages are defrauded today. They're not following the law of consideration. Mr. Daly argued that somehow got the bank to admit that they created the money with a stroke of a pen at the time of the loan, and that there was no actual official law empowering them to do so. Since the bank did not put up anything of value other than the ink from the pen for Mr. Daly's home mortgage, there was no consideration. Therefore, the mortgage agreement was null and void. When I went into the court in Two Harbors, Minnesota, I said the bank deceived me into thinking I received dollars when in fact all I received was alter vires and book entries on the bank's liabilities. So they created the money for my loan out of thin air. But I paid down $7,500. I paid more than half. I paid for more than what the property was worth at the time. Down. That's why I won the foreclosure, I believe, because God does uphold righteousness. And they were defrauding me from the beginning. Justice Martin V. Mahoney ruled against the bank and denied the foreclosure. Mr. Daly kept his house and paid no more mortgage. 6 months later, Justice Mahoney was found dead, alleged by poison, and Mr. Daly was disbarred and never practiced law again. You don't go against the bankers, or you lose your license, your bar license to practice law. You see how that works, folks? Who's in control is some thugs that are forcing things upon us. You can be right, but when you do, you go up against the enemy within better, well then, when you go up against the enemy within, better be prepared to pay the ultimate price to be right, because you will most likely be standing there alone, and the enemy never loses. It really sucks that anytime somebody tries to identify this problem, this crime that these banker, criminal, devil jerks have been perpetuating for the last few hundred years, they are quickly silenced. John Kennedy tried to stop it. They killed him. Unfortunately, those in power have all the power, and they like it that way. And they have lots of money to hire assassins with. So we are beat. There's nothing we can do except one thing. All we can do is use the power of collective imagination to imagine one or two of these bankers starting to feel guilty and deciding to bring down their own system. I can imagine a world in which the monetary system benefits all of humanity. Can you imagine this? A summary of the facts. Here's a brief summary of the facts. Jerome Daly had a mortgage with the First National Bank of Montgomery, Minnesota. In spring 1967, he was $476 in arrears. The bank foreclosed and bought the property at a sheriff's sale on June 26, 1967. The bank sued for possession. A jury trial presided over by Martin V. Mahoney, Justice of the Peace, Credit River Township, Scott County, Minnesota, was held on December 7, 1968. The bank's president, one Lawrence V. Morgan, familiar name, appeared along with the lawyer R. Melby for the plaintiff, and Jerome Daly, who was a lawyer, appeared on his own behalf. In other words, the Credit River decision which still is the law of the land, declared the following. The Federal Reserve Act is unconstitutional and void. Trump said he's going to get rid of the Federal Reserve. I just read that. The National Banking Act is unconstitutional and void. The mortgage acquired by the First National Bank of Montgomery, Minnesota in the regular course of its business, along with the foreclosure and the sheriff's sale, to be void. I don't have to pay my mortgage. What happened next? Can you use this defense? I have investigated the Jerome Daly case, and what I found was just as interesting as the outcome. The whole case was based on trying to expose the scam we call mortgage loans. It was crafted to expose the fact that banks create money out of thin air by depositing your note onto their books as an asset and then loaning the same asset back to you as a loan. So basically, you are loaning yourself the money. Most people in this country have been lied to believe that the money loaned by the bank is from the deposits of the bank customers. The more money the public saves, the more it can use that money to lend. In a way, the bank's sleight of hands accomplishes this task by creating your deposit based on the note you sign and then lending it back as if it was already on the books. The Jerome Daly case was an attempt to prove it once and for all to prove once and for all. The problem was that no judge in any court that had jurisdiction would allow the evidence to be admitted. The borrower would request the bookkeeping, ledgers, and discovery, and the bank would refuse, and the judge would side with the bank. In some cases, the judge would force the case to be settled before any such evidence could be entered on the record. They don't like evidence in courtrooms, believe me. A lot of them, they don't want the evidence there. They don't go by the evidence. They go by what they want to do as dominion, as taking charge. Since most people are ignorant of this issue, the bank would simply take the loss. After all, this was all free money to begin with. To get around this, the bank in the Daly case was served with a complaint in front of a justice of the peace. The bank didn't realize this until after the president of the bank was forced to testify and admit to the scam under oath. He figured that when he testified, there would be a handy judge there to say he did not have to answer those questions. After his testimony, the jury was immediately sent to deliberate and came back with that verdict and has become so famous. In my situation, the bank didn't admit to anything. I just brought the paper and declared that they borrowed to me all 3 violations of book entries in the bank's liabilities, and the judge said you proved fraud, because they all knew that that's what they did. The same thing happens today with the income taxes. There is no law that says you are required to file an income tax, because the law only applies to corporations of foreign nationals. As soon as the defense tries to claim that he was not required to file a tax return, it is immediately ruled as frivolous and that it cannot be used in the court as a defense. The IRS and the judges have made claiming you are not required to file an income tax claim so toxic that it is even considered below UFO sighting claims. Both should be held accountable and prosecuted to the fullest extent. There was a recent case where the IRS tried to make an example out of an attorney who wrote a book that said there was no law requiring a person to file an income tax return. The Tom Cryer jury returned a verdict of not guilty on all charges. The case will never be used or seen, for that matter, in the cases cited in the court because it is not a published opinion. Since it was decided correctly, no appeal required, no published case law. You remember the Bill of Rights? The trial should be a public trial. Public. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment of a grand jury. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy a right to a speedy and public trial. Is it criminal to not pay your mortgage? They call it a misdemeanor or a criminal act, but they need a public trial. An interview about the case with an associate justice who knew and worked with Justice Martin B. Mahoney. Here's the interview. The Credit River decision handed down by a jury of 12 on a cold day in December in the Credit River Township Hall was an experience that I'll never forget. The Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court had phoned me a week before the trial and asked me if I would be an associate justice in assisting Justice Martin V. Mahoney, since he had never handled a jury trial before. I accepted, and it took me 2 hours to get my car running in the 22 below zero weather. I got to the courtroom about 30 minutes before the trial and helped get the wood stove going. Since the trial was being held in an unheated storeroom of a general store, this was the first time I met Justice Mahoney, and I was impressed with his no-nonsense manner of handling matters before him. My object was to help pick the jury and to keep Jerome Daly and the attorney representing the Bank of Montgomery from engaging in a fistfight. The courtroom was highly charged and the jury was all business. The banker testified about the mortgage loan given to Jerome Daly, but then Daly cross-examined the banker about the creating of money out of thin air, and the banker admitted that this was standard banking practice. When Justice Mahoney heard the banker testify that he could create money out of thin air, Mahoney said, "It sounds like fraud to me." I looked at the faces of the jurors, and they were all agreeing with Mahoney by shaking their heads and by the looks on their faces. I must admit that up until that point, I really don't believe Jerome's theory and thought he was making this up. After I heard the testimony of the banker, my mouth had dropped open in shock, and it was in complete disbelief. There was no doubt in my mind that the jury would find for Daley. Jerome Daley had taken on the banks, the Federal Reserve banking system, and the money lenders had won. It is now 28 years since the landmark decision, and the money lenders had won. It is now 20 years since the landmark decision, and Justice Mahoney is quoted more often than any Supreme Court justice ever was. The money boys that run the private Federal Reserve Bank soon got back at Mahoney by poisoning him in what appeared to have been a fishing boat accident. But with his body pumped full of poison in June of 1969, less than 6 months later, both Jerome Daley and Justice Martin V. Mahoney are truly the greatest men that I have ever had the pleasure to meet. The Credit River decision was and still is the most important legal decision ever decided by a jury. Ever decided by a jury. We see that making money out of thin air is what they do. They create more money as they go forth. Here we have Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. No state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility. They can't do bills of attainder like towing your car when there's snow removal. That's a bill of attainder. They're taking your car. You own the property. But the state actually owns the cars nowadays because the maritime government made a curse on that for us, that we wouldn't have private ownership of cars. We don't really own our cars. It's under the military complex that we have the cars. Thomas Jefferson's quotes, "The central bank is an institution of the most deadly hostility existing against the principles and form of our Constitution. I am an enemy to all banks discounting bills or notes for anything but coin. If the American people allow private banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all their property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent and that their fathers conquered." Under a gold standard, the amount of credit that an economy can support is determined by the economy's tangible assets, since every credit instrument is ultimately a claim on some tangible asset. The abandonment of the gold standard made it possible for the welfare statists to use the banking system as a means to an unlimited expansion of credit. He wrote clearly and forcefully about how it was necessary to restrain the deep state and protect individual freedom. So you can win by an army, but you can overthrow a country by debt. That's why they want all these people from Mexico coming up here and from the other countries. And I pray for those souls. I pray that God would help them to find a good life in their country and in our country, whatever the case may bring that about that. But the people that are trying to overthrow America are trying to make us go into debt. To the banking system, to the fake money, to bringing more people in here. They get on welfare, then you can break a country by debt. Obama signed a law that they would control all food, all farms, all small farms. Trump voted a law against that, but that way they can take away your food and then come to your door and say, "Well, give me some food, give us your guns." They get rid of the personal property rights of people owning guns, but they already got rid of the rights of the militia to bring their weapons home from military service and be a standing militia at home, waiting to be called up. And if there's ever something going against our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, which they already did do, and we didn't overcome it because it happened during the Civil War. That's when that happened. The new gold standard. Take a look at this gold $20 bill. 20 in gold coin. $20 in gold coin right there, folks. $20 in gold coin. Iceland got rid of their Federal Reserve bankers and they started new money, gold and silver. Got rid of all their home mortgages and started mortgages that are backed by gold and silver. You see at the bottom where it says in gold coin. Well, before 1971, our dollars were backed by gold. That meant illegally you could get gold back from the U.S. Treasury simply by handing over your paper currency. You know, I'm asking my bank to make my money real currency. When I put money in there, they make the exchange rate right and turn it into real currency. They need to do that for each one of our bank accounts to go back to the Constitution. Never forget to conquer a nation first disarm its citizens. Our young students are being deceived. David Hogg is affiliated with the Center for Progress. George Soros. We are witnessing the rise of a Hitler Youth type movement designed to separate Americans from their guns. Schools should be educating the students on the relevant history about what happens to people when they give up their guns. Many think we are witnessing the rise of Nazi Germany right here in America, and it is beginning with many of our kids and a complicit and very liberal mainstream media. Why did Obama nationalize the U.S. food supply with an executive order 13603? First your food, then they take your guns. Obama openly calls for gun confiscation. Spread this everywhere. Here we got Dr. Oz promotes RFID microchip implants for people. Calls it the next big thing. Wow. Microchips are implanted in Mexican officials. Attorney General prosecutors carry security pass under their skin. Mexico City, security has reached the subcutaneous level for Mexico's Attorney General and at least 160 people in his office. They have been implanted with microchips that get them access to secure areas of their headquarters. It's a pioneering application of a technology that is widely used in animals but not in humans. Mexico's top federal prosecutors and investigators began receiving chip implants in their arms in November in order to get access to restricted areas. John Adams quotes, "There are only two ways to conquer or enslave a country. One is by the sword, and the other is through death." We don't want to have death. Kavanaugh quotes Matthew chapter 25. Now, I heard he was a Jesuit, or he was Oath of the Knights of Malta, but here the scripture says, "If you did it for the least one of these, my brethren, you did it unto me." If he's not like Queen Mary, who persecuted and killed many, many people, so much blood in her lifetime. We hope and pray that he'll turn things back to the Republic too. Because he's already an officer in the Supreme Court, which is a maritime Supreme Court. It's not the lawful government, folks. We need to get lawful government back. It's been re-inhabited. Chief Justice Moak, you can hear him on republicfortheunitedstates.org and call in and listen to the program and start to get educated and re-establish the Constitution and Bill of Rights, which once was America, and reestablish our money system under gold and silver, a mile of highway, a mile of titanium steel bar, or whatever, whatever causes that we can do to bring forth true righteousness again in our loan systems and building our houses. The Bible says you should not borrow a loan, but you should be the borrower, not the lender. You should be the lender, not the borrower. You should give freely to your brother, freely, without interest. Yep, if you have that ability, that's great, folks. That's great. Okay, let's got 5 minutes left. Let's read a little bit of the Christian Juror Society in California. A juror society is an organized political community and a synonym of nation, state, and country. It is founded in the general sense on the law of God, from whom it derives its authority and right to exist, in the protection of life, liberty, and property, and the preservation of the Christian way of life. It is founded in the specific sense on Scripture, lex non scripta, common law, maxims of law, and the Constitution maxims, and exists specifically for the protection and preservation of the rights of Christians and the advancement of the crown rights of King Jesus, Yeshua. The purpose of the Christian Juror Society in California is to reestablish de jure civil government in California and a Christian republic through local county-based houses of delegates, duly elected by those Christian electors who support such a reestablishment. The loss of the American Union states, based on the Constitution for the United States of America, took place when Abraham Lincoln, in cooperation with the Congress, the courts, and the state governments, created a condition of sine die, in which all legislative branches of all lawful civil governments in the United States and District of Columbia ceased to exist as de jure constitutional republics. The states lost all their republics. Sine die is a condition that results when legislative bodies adjourn without setting a date, time, and place, set certain to reconvene. Failure to properly adjourn leaves such bodies sine die, or literally without date. Its effect is final and terminates the lawful existence of a deliberative body. They put aside the Constitution and Bill of Rights and the real government. They put it aside. The sine die of the de jure lawful civil governments took place on March 27, 1861. On April 15, 1861, Congress was reconvened by executive proclamation, and Congress sat at the pleasure of the President, and jointly they seized all the powers of the de jure government and used them to create the current fiction we now suffer under, this fictitious deep state government. The new civil power created during and after Lincoln's war against the states became a de facto imperial power by the adoption of the old Roman imperial codes. All states in the former Union became de facto franchises of the reconstructed United States, a federal corporation. We got 1 minute left, folks. The courts of the reconstructed de facto imperial government were converted to military tribunals, often called district or municipal courts, but are in fact provost courts. Provost military courts are the district and municipal courts of Hennepin County and Ramsey County and Anoka County. We bind those and we loose the common law courts to come back. The man installed in the White House from that day to this sits as the commander-in-chief and is the flag gold fringed that flies in provost courts today. He is the president of the de facto corporation created in 1871. So we need to go back to the republic, folks. We got 1 minute left. I pray that you be conscious of this and go to the republicfortheunitedstates.org and spend time, be due diligent and study time at 8 o'clock every night, Monday through Friday. And you can listen to the Republic and how it was re-inhabited, and you can become a part of reestablishing America's original true government that made America great. Pray for Donald Trump to bring things back to the Republic quicker than he is doing, to roll the wheel a little faster, because it needs to happen for the safety of the whole land and for all the people, and for the well-being of our children and our posterity. And I thank you for watching today. In the mighty name of Yeshua. Yeshua bless you out there. Bye now.